So hello again and welcome to another gear video. This time I'm talking about the Boss SY-1000, which is an upgrade to the SY-300. I bought this fairly recently, mainly to go with the GK3 equipped Stratocaster I was playing in a previous video. But I was also interested to see how well it worked with the violin and basically without the GK pickup. Is it worth the upgrade from the SY-300? Is it worth the money getting it instead? If you don't have a GK equipped device, as my violins currently aren't. So that's the point of this video. I'm going to mention a couple of features of the GT-1000, a few of this, just the reasons for that will become clearer later on, but I'm sort of comparing it as a multi-effects unit as well as a synthesizer, because I think it scores quite well on that. There's the hardware there, you can see the two of them. So without a GK pickup, all you do only is you get are the dynamic synth there. If you've got a GK pickup, there are all sorts of different synths in there. There's GR300, there's oscillator. But without that, you just get the dynamic synth and the normal input. The dynamic synth is functionally the same thing as the SY-300, with some differences that I'm going to explore in the next few minutes. Hardware-wise, you've obviously got more buttons. You've got 8 completely programmable buttons there, whereas on the SY-300 you've got 3. There are 4 buttons obviously, but one of them's just an on-off for the effect. You've got 4 knobs on the SY-300 and 8 on the 1000, all of which are programmable to do what on earth you want, within reason. And you've got 2 sockets at the back for expansion of switches or expression pedals. I think it's a good idea to have an expression pedal with it. I don't have one at the moment, mainly for space, but I do generally use one. It does seem to almost expect you to have one in a lot of ways. And another really good feature, particularly if you are using it as an effects box, it's got a mono send and return, which I tend to use with a looper, because I like my loopers to go before the master delay and reverb. So those are the hardware differences. Software wise, right, first thing you notice when you go into this, the patch thing there is that the oscillators you used to know and love are now called instruments. I suppose that's for compatibility with all the GR things, because they can be different if you're using the GK and GR system. And each instrument has a normal mix switch as well, which is quite handy. So you don't have to faff around with having an extra oscillator which is connected to the normal input, or have a separate one to mix. You can mix them individually with each instrument, which I think is really rather nice. One thing you don't get is oscillator sync between the oscillators, which you do on the SY-300. I suspect that's because they're separate instruments now, so that it's hard to interface between the different code blocks. I don't know for sure, obviously, but that might be a reason. Bit of a disappointment there. That I quite like oscillator sync. It's a good synthesizer feature. So the main oscillator sections are pretty much similar. You've got the same sort of oscillator waveforms in there. You've got these sine, sawtooth, multi-saw, PWM, squares. So let's do a quick compare of the sounds we've got here. So this is the SY-300 on a PWM at 70. I've only got a little bit of reverb on that, no other effects. And this is the same thing on the SY-1000. So I think there seems to be a little more low end there, a bit more beef to the sound, slightly less fizzy and tinny. So yeah, it's nice. I think it's a nicer, slightly warmer sound, I think. Let's try the multi-saw. So I've got a detune saw at 10. Let's change this. Detune saw at 10. SY-1000. Yeah, so I think generally the SY-1000 oscillators are a bit nicer, a bit warmer. That's a nice thing in itself. Good. Layers are supported, as are on the SY-300, but they're not. The screen isn't as nice. So if you look on the SY-300 layers, you get these nice lines that work very well. On again, I suspect this is because of the instruments being separate. You only get the these parameter things here, more like the GT1000. So they're there. They're not as fun, but they do work. They're absolutely fine. One thing I do miss on the 1000 against the 300 is a nice easy movement between oscillators and their parameters. Because if I go to oscillator there, I can easily switch from oscillator 1, oscillator 2 to 3 just by holding down the select button and turning it. That makes it very quick to get a 2 or 3 oscillator patch working. You don't need to exit and go into the next one and then go down again. There's a real time saver that I do miss. The feature I always wanted on the SY-300 is still not there. There's no release stage on the dynamic synth envelope. I suppose that's just the way it works, to be honest. The OIC synth on the SY-1000 does do that, but you need the GK system for that. So, well, you do have oscillator hold still, so I'll show you that later. The oscillator hold's still there and does all the useful things that does. LFOs, there's not a lot new in the LFOs. The only real difference you've got there are all the usual shapes. Main difference there is a sync there, which will sync it to the clock, and it'll also sync to the sequences. Sequences are very good. I'll show you those in a minute. Filter, we've got all the usual filter modes we had before. We've also got ladder filters. So ladder filters are the sort of things you get in Moog synthesizers. Moog. Not going to get into the pizza pizza thing again. So they're a nice sort of, just a different sounding filter. So if I show you, this is the 12 dB per octave low pass filter. Let me turn it down a bit, give me some cut off. And then if you do it to the ladder low pass, a slight difference in sound there. One thing you don't have on the ladder filters is a dB per octave switch. So I think they're about 24 dB per octave. So if I compare that with the actual 24 dB per octave old filter, it's pretty similar, I think. Yeah, so yeah, a couple of new filters. There's a high pass ladder filter as well if you want that sort of thing. Very useful for drum machine thing, which I said on the other hand. Might be quite a nice thing to add to the top of another sound. It's probably a bit shrill on its own. So yeah, 2 new filters. It's nice. On the amp stage, we've got not a lot else, but we've got a high cut and a low cut. And they're quite useful actually, because you don't need to use an EQ block after the instrument there to tame things down a bit. So they're quite handy. Little thing, but useful. So the biggest change we've got in the SY-300 in the instrument block is the sequencers. We now have 2 of those sequencers, and they're really flexible. They can affect the filter and the amplitude as well as the pitch. So that's just absolutely game changing, really, really helpful. And we've got some envelope shapes as well, so that each step doesn't just go straight up and down, it can go sloping up and down. And there's even some multi-slopes, which I'll show you in a minute. They're really helpful. There's a re-trigger effect, so you can make it go once and then stop, and you re-trigger it when you feel like it. Also really nice. And there's turbo mode to make it go twice as fast if you want sort of really fuzzy, really fancy stuff. I'm not sure if there's a way of ganging the sequences together like you do in the SY-300 to be one sequencer that they all use. I suspect that's because they're instruments again now rather than just oscillators. So if you do want all the instruments to use the same sequencer, you're going to have to put them in multiple times, which is a bit of a nuisance, but that's what it is. So let's have a look at what we can do with these sequences then. So this is your standard pitch sequencer here. Very short 8x8 note sequence. So that's the sort of sequences we used to get with the SY-300. We're all familiar with those, I suspect. With this, what we can do is we can put the cutoff, filter cutoff. So if I send the filter cutoff down a bit, so it's got something to come up from. And now we have see that nice pulsing now. That's from these little waveforms here. So you can change the curve to be all sorts of things. Allows you to build up some really creative things. They're slightly annoying with the pitch, but when you put the cutoff in there or the so there you can see the effects there. Cut off. You also see what different range of pitch, cut off and level. So it effectively gives you 6 sequences rather than just the 2. So all the pitch, cut off and level of a sequencer have to have the same number of steps as each other. They can have different values and different curves and everything. So it's really, really flexible. If I turn them both on, we can do so lots of really good things you can do with those. Barely scratched the surface of those, apart from the one thing I did. Now if you remember a few years ago I did how to use SY-300 as a drum machine, link up there. You can also do that with this of course, and you get some really, really nice effects. So this is one I played with last night. It didn't take me very long. And if you use the instrument hold feature, of course, so yeah, we're fun with that. The sequences just open up these kind of things really wide. Of course, you're using up an instrument for each of the drums. So there's an instrument there doing the kick drum and another one doing the hi-hat, and if I had the snare, that's all 3 of them in use. But then you can still use the normal input there and put loads of effects on it and make it quite nice. So there's things you can do with that I think are very powerful. So now we've got onto the effects blocks you've got. There are a lot more effects blocks than this. On the face of it, looks slightly fewer because you've got FX 1, 2 and 3, whereas on the 300 you've got 1, 2, 3 and 4. But you need to remember on this one we've got dedicated effects for distortions, reverbs, the master delay, several other delays, a chorus. So the effects are only for those other things. And in fact they can also do delays and choruses and things, so they're quite good. So there's all those extra blocks work really well. There's a few new effects. There's an acoustic resonance effect, which actually was quite nice for the violin. Sort of solid body violin, bit dead. And I'll put the guitar. Slightly overpowering of the low end, I suppose it's for guitars, but you can tune it a bit. There's a tone and the levels and things there. I just literally plugged it in to see what would happen. Other effects, there's an auto wire, a defretter, yeah, okay. There's a harmonist, always useful. It's not massively good quality, it's about similar to the GT-1000 to be fair, but... Cats. But it is there, and if you put some, a bit more delay and reverb on there, you can probably get away with it. There's a humanizer effect, which is just annoying really. It just goes ooh ah as you bow the note. If you're playing a guitar, you can make it to respond to the picking, but that doesn't work on a violin because you can't give it enough attack unless you really dig into the note with a bow. Pedal bend, which can be good. I don't have a pedal attached to this, I can't show you, but it will just something to make it. It's a pitch, it's like a whammy pitch of the ooh stuff, which you can do on the pedal with the foot. It's quite good. There's a ring mod. People like ring mods. I'm not a fan. Sound hold is there, which basically just does a very granular sample of the note you're playing and holds it. I've never liked that. The GT-1000 has it, but it's really dead sound. I think better use is made of the oscillators to do that, using oscillator hold, because at least you can use the filters and the LFOs and now the sequencers to do that. So yeah, sound hold, again, not a fan. There's a vibrato effect. Yeah, well, that's, you play violin, you should do that yourself. Univibe has been renamed a classic vibe. The master delay options are similar to the GT-1000 version 1. So, cross fingers, the new ones that came in the GT-1000 version 2, like the Space Echo and the Bin Rec, might turn up, But generally there are no more new effects, new delay effects than in the SY-300. But yeah, some nice new effects blocks, good. And you've got more effects blocks to play with as well, so they're good. For amp sims, again, yeah, they're quite fun to play with actually with violins. Be careful with them though, because they can get very streaky. They're mainly for guitarists. So, other useful things, we've got one divider and a mixer, which is this thing here. You can do really nice things with that. The GT-1000 has a few of these, but this has only the one. But one of the nice things you can do, chorusy reverbs. And even compress your reverbs, which is quite fun. So you put your earbud in a separate track and then you can just do it. Things like that. And I actually left the harmonist on by mistake there and it almost sounded reasonable. So you see what I mean? Let's turn the harmonizer off. So yeah, big sustained reverbs. That's nice because you can put the compression on the reverb rather than on the dry tone. So all sorts of possibilities with those. They're great fun. Fewer than the GT-1000, but enough to get good use out of them, I think. When I wrote the script for this, I wrote that you can't move the links around like you can on the. You can't do this. So you can't attach the different oscillators together. On the SY-300, on the 1000 they're fixed, they're there, and you can't move them. What I discovered while I was playing around with it is you can actually push and hold that, and the instruments themselves will move. So that's effectively the same feature. So you can group normal input with particular synths and particular synths with each other as flexibly as you can with the SY-300. It's good. So I just found that out a few minutes ago. The rise and fall time, when you push a switch, they are implemented. I was worried about this because it's a very GT-1000 like interface, and the GT-1000 does not have rise and fall time, and it annoys me intensely. But this one does. It's implemented on the on here. So we've got, there you go, rise time and fall time, so that when you push an effect, it can come in gradually and go out gradually. It's a really nice feature. I wish they'd put this on the GT-1000. It annoys me it's not there. There's no blender like you get in the SY-300, which is great for finding patches by just blending two different ones. Couple that with the fact that there are not many built-in effects that work without the GK pickup anyway. You're really on your own making patches for it, so you need to be fairly confident of your abilities to program this thing. As I said earlier, you will want to run an expression pedal. I think there are literally 2 foot volume blocks on the effects. By default, they're attached to the normal output and the synth, so you can mix the two, which is probably need to be sat down to do that. But anyway, so yeah, it works really well with the foot switch, and of course you've got a spare socket as well. You can put extra foot switches in there as well, so it's really nice, expandable. I think that's a good thing. It has a thing called variations on all the effects and all the instruments. They work a bit like the stomp boxes on the GT-1000, but they're way less annoying. So you basically store a set of presets for each style of effect or instrument, and you save them by name. Come with some preset ones which are okay. They're less annoying than the GT-1000 ones in that you can't accidentally break everything by mistake. The stomp boxes on the GT-1000, if you change a parameter on one of them, it changes all the way through all the ones that use a similar stomp box, and you can get yourself into a bit of a knot if you do that. I did that recently by turning the gain down on one of my EQs. It took me ages to figure out what I had done. But you can't do that with this. The variations are a bit more straightforward. So I do like the stomp box on the GT-1000, but it can be annoying. So let's have a quick. So yeah, it sounds nice. Sounds, yeah, probably slightly better than the SY-300, I'd say, as we found out earlier. And it's great fun to play with. So conclusions, I think just looking at the synth section, it's not a massive upgrade from the SY-300. Probably not worth the 330 quid difference if that's all you're looking at, unless you particularly want the sequencers, which are great and really good fun. If you are using the GK, obviously it's a no-brainer. I think it's a really nice thing to have. If you're using it as a multi-effects plus synth, then I think that's a different proposition. It's a very useful everything in one box. So my intention, and then disclaimer, I'd said before, I do have the GK on my Stratocaster. I will be gigging with just this box and a looper for glider theory, and I think it's good enough to do that. And I think if you just wanted a few of the synth effects, just to add some nice stuff, or to use the drum machine effect, you know, that sort of thing, then it's probably going to be really nice, because it's quite small, it's very portable. Don't forget to add on the expression pedal, but it makes it very portable. It's very nice. So I think if you're looking at a single box synth plus effects, I think it's a nice thing to have. It's not cheap, of course it's not cheap, But to look at the price of a GT-1000, it's probably quite decent value, unless you only wanted the features of a GT-100 or a GT-1000 core, which are much smaller devices. But this has the synth in it, so it's what you want to use it for. If you want the weird noises of synths, it's great fun. Will I be getting a GK equipped violin like a Cantini? Yeah, probably, but not this year. There's way too much on my plate at the moment, but it's on the radar, I think. I think it might be fun. So yeah, watch this space, I think. So that was the SY-1000. Thank you for watching all the way through this. The video turned out to be longer than I expected, so hope you enjoyed it, and see you in the next one. Bye.